The door at the base of the lighthouse slammed open by itself, and the spiral stairs began to shake. I froze at the top, the glass room bright with the beam, the wind howling like a living thing. Then, over the old radio, a voice I knew was impossible whispered my name. "Evan, don't look down." My flashlight rolled to the edge of the catwalk, stopped against the lip, and the bulb flickered twice. Footsteps started up the metal stairs, slow, scraping, steady. I was supposed to be the only one here for 2 nights. But someone, or something, was climbing to me. You want to know how I ended up here? It started simple. My friend Jake works for the Coastal Trust, and he needed someone to stay at Dagger Point Light while the repair team fixed a busted generator in town. It was late fall. Tourists were gone, gulls were quiet, and the fog came early and stayed late. "Just keep the beacon going, make sure no one messes with the site," he told me. 2 nights. Easy pay. I like quiet jobs, and I like the ocean, so I said yes. The lighthouse was an old, tall needle stuck into a short cliff. It rose from a ring of wet rocks like a bone. There was a small keeper's house next to it, but the power in that building was out, so I had a cot in the lantern room and a propane stove up there for coffee. I had a paper logbook, a wind-up radio, and a box of spare bulbs. No internet. My phone showed 1 bar and then gave up. The first afternoon felt fine. I did a walk around, checked the door locks, climbed the stairs to count the steps like a kid, 113, if you're wondering, and watched the sea slam itself against the black rocks. The sky looked bruised. By dusk, fog rolled in from nowhere. It came like a slow river, swallowing the horizon, turning the world into a gray bowl. I turned on the beacon. The lens spun with a soft hum. Every 6 seconds, the beam swept the fog and my heart settled. The light felt like company. I heated a can of soup and read old entries in the logbook. Some were boring. Wind NE 12 knots. Beacon serviced. Some were strange. Singing from stairwell, 2:09 a.m. Another said. Voice on radio asks for Keeper Thomas. Thomas died 1931. I laughed, closed the book, and told myself people write stories to make long nights interesting. I tried the radio anyway. All I got was static and the crackle of faraway storms. At midnight, the wind picked up like a switch had been flipped. The whole tower groaned. Bolts creaked. A loose rope snapped against the glass. I was not scared, just alert. I had a heavy flashlight, a whistle, and a flare gun. I told myself that was enough. I made a note in the logbook about the gusts and sat in a camp chair, wrapped in a blanket, watching the white beam cut the gray. Then I heard it. A soft bump from the base door. Pause. Another bump, like someone testing the wood with the heel of a hand. The sound traveled up the hollow of the tower, thin and clear. I stood. The radio hissed. I clicked it off and listened harder. The wind made a low moan through the vent slats, but the bump came again, 3 times in a row, the last harder than the first. I told myself it was rope, or drift, or a loose sign. I took the flashlight and started down. The beam shook in my hand. My steps rang on the metal treads. The air grew colder with each turn. Halfway down, I stopped. A scrape came from below, like wet shoes on iron. Then a whisper, too soft to catch. "Hello?" I called, and my voice sounded small. The scrape stopped. I reached the bottom and pulled the door's inner bar out of its slot. The outer door still had a chain. I cracked it and flashed the light out into fog so thick it felt like cloth. My beam caught only the first ring of slick stones. No person. No animal. But there were wet footprints on the floor, too long to be mine, too flat to be a boot. They led from the door to the first stair. I followed the prints with the light until they vanished at the 3rd step like someone had just faded. I closed the door, set the bar, and climbed back up, counting in my head to keep my mind steady, 39, 40, 41. At the top, I found the logbook open where I had left it closed. The page had changed. There was a new line in crabbed, angry handwriting. Do not follow. I stared at it. I am not the kind of person who scares easy, but I felt my stomach go cold, like I had swallowed the fog. I ran a finger over the ink. It was damp. I told myself I must have missed that line earlier. I told myself the footprints were mine, the water tracked by my own shoes. But my shoes were dry. I turned the radio back on. Static. Then a click. Then, as clear as if a man stood inches from the microphone, a voice I didn't know said, "Left the chain on wrong side," and clicked off. I hadn't told anyone about the chain. To keep my hands busy, I made coffee that tasted like rust. The wind rattled the glass. The beam kept spinning, faithful as a heartbeat. I paced the catwalk, checked the vents, checked the bulb, checked the tiny copper plaque that named the light, Dagger Point, 1901. I tried to laugh at myself. "You're alone," I said out loud. "You're jumpy, that's all." The beam swept my face and made my shadow jump on the wall like it didn't belong to me. At about 2 a.m., the foghorn, dead since summer, blared once. It was not a long, low warning. It was a short, sharp cry, a sound like a person trying very hard not to scream. My mug hit the floor and cracked. Coffee bled into lines in the stone like dark veins. I grabbed the flare gun and the flashlight and rushed down again, this time faster, calling out, "Who's there?" I heard the sea answer and the wind answer, but nothing human. When I reached the base, the door was still barred. The chain still latched. But the hook that hangs the old keeper's raincoat was swinging, and the heavy yellow coat itself swayed like someone had just brushed past it. That's when the radio upstairs crackled to life by itself and a different voice, soft, tired, close, said my name for the first time. "Evan." I looked up the throat of the tower, and my light caught something pale leaning over the rail 3 floors above me. A face. A face that shouldn't be there. It stared down without blinking. The stairs shuddered under a new weight that wasn't mine, and the tower lights went out all at once. In the black, the footsteps began to rush, fast, hard, straight down toward me. "You said?" Continued the Chapter 2. ChatGPT said. Chapter 2. The footsteps hit the landing just above me, metal ringing, the sound bending in the narrow stairwell. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking, trying to aim it up the center column. Nothing. Just blackness. Then, another step, closer this time, and the air seemed to thicken, like the tower itself was breathing. "Jake!" I yelled, though I knew my friend was miles away. The voice that came back was a whisper from 2 floors up. "Evan." Not an echo. A voice. My name again, drawn out, careful, almost mocking. I fired the flare gun. The red light burst like blood inside a jar. For 2 seconds, everything glowed crimson, the bolts, the rails, the wet stone floor. And there, halfway down the stairs, was a shape. A man-sized shadow, but hollow. I could see straight through where its chest should have been. When the flare burned out, the dark came back twice as thick, and something brushed my shoulder. I ran. I took the steps 3 at a time, lungs burning, every clang of my boots chasing the one behind it. At the top, I slammed the hatch shut and dragged an old iron box over it. The radio was still hissing. Then, clear as day. "You shouldn't have stayed." That was when I realized the voice didn't come from the speaker. It came from the vent behind me. I froze. My flashlight flickered. A cold draft pushed through the vent grating, smelling like salt and smoke. I leaned closer and heard breathing. Slow. Wet. Human. I backed away, turned off the radio, and forced myself to think. The lighthouse was built on solid rock, no tunnels, no crawl space. Just the tower and the sea. I tried to rationalize it, sound bouncing, wind whistling. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the place itself was awake. I needed to calm down. I sat by the lantern glass, letting the beacon's rhythm steady my breathing. Every 6 seconds, the beams swept out into fog and came back across the walls. I counted each pass like a heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. Then I saw something in the distance. A light. Another light. It flashed back at me from the water below, like a mirror. I thought it might be a ship's signal, but it wasn't moving. It stayed in one spot, right at the edge of the rocks. Then it blinked twice. Long, short, just like the Morse code in the logbook entry I'd read earlier. "Help me!" The radio hissed again. "He's on the rocks," it whispered. "Go down." I wanted to believe someone needed help. I grabbed the flashlight and started for the stairs, telling myself over and over that I'd find nothing but a broken buoy or some trick of the fog. The steps groaned louder than before. The closer I got to the base, the stronger the smell of wet stone and rust became. At the bottom, I lifted the bar on the door. The cold hit me so hard my eyes watered. The light outside was still there, hovering low. I unchained the door and stepped out. The fog swallowed me instantly. My flashlight beam went about 10 feet before dying in the mist. I could hear the surf, heavy, rolling, and something else between the waves. A voice. A man's singing softly. "Keep the light, keep the light." I followed the sound down the rocky path. My boots slipped on the moss. Every few seconds I turned to make sure the lighthouse was still behind me. The beam cut across the fog like a white blade, then vanished. The singing grew louder. The light was closer now, maybe 20 yards ahead. I crouched behind a rock, shining my flashlight toward it. What I saw made my stomach twist. It was a lantern, but not one of ours. An old oil lamp, swinging from a hand. The hand was pale, skin tight like paper, and it belonged to a man in a long black coat, face hidden by the hood. He was standing ankle-deep in seawater, staring toward the waves. "Hey!" I shouted. "You okay?" He turned slow, like his joints didn't work right. The light swung across his face, and I saw eyes that were all white. No pupils, no color. Just milk-white orbs staring straight at me. His mouth moved, and in a voice like wind over glass he said, "It's not your turn." The lantern went out. I ran back toward the tower, hard hammering, slipping on the rocks. I slammed the door shut through the chain, dropped the bar into place, and just stood there shaking. My flashlight beam caught the footprints again, wet, heavy, but this time they led away from the door. Up the stairs. I followed, too afraid not to. They were still wet, still fresh, but fading as I climbed. At the top, they stopped in front of the lantern room. The logbook was open again, pages fluttering like something invisible had just turned them. I looked down. A new line had been written across the bottom of the page, in the same angry hand. "He wants the light back." A crash echoed from below, metal on stone, the sound of something huge slamming into the base of the tower. The beam of the lighthouse shuddered. The glass cracked with a high-pitched scream. I ran to the window and looked down. The fog had cleared just enough to see the shoreline. The man with the lantern was gone, but now, standing right where I had been moments ago, was a second figure. Shorter, barefoot, and holding my flare gun. Then the beam swung again, lighting the rocks for half a second, and I saw his face. It was mine. Before I could move, the tower shook so violently that the lens above me shattered, raining down shards of glass like rain. The light went out completely, plunging the sea and sky into blackness. And from below, I heard my own voice, clear, furious, and close, shouting up the stairs. "You shouldn't have lit it!